Cool. And we are live. Hi, everyone.
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Welcome
Hello.
back to another week with the return of Vicki.
Hi.
So we're very grateful to have Vicki back and very excited for this particular stream because Vicki's going to review your work.
Cool.
So yeah, I've been really looking forward to this, and kind of this whole overarching project that we've had for this season. So we've got, so far I've got 3 submissions for tonight. I've got Darren, Jolene, and Alessandro. I've got all of your files and all that ready. And I think we're just pretty much going to jump into it. So yes, we're very grateful to have Vicki here to give her perspective on it. I think it's a really unique opportunity that we get to do this. So we're just going to dive in. And
Yeah.
Jolene, we're going to start with yours.
Jolene?
Yes. So I'm going to swap over the visual and try to full screen this a little bit more. Sorry, my stream settings are set up a little odd. And we'll be able to play this. So Jolene, while we play through, if you want to give us kind of any more context to sort of maybe how you approached your theme, and what we want to aim to do tonight is to go through kind of all the sections that you've covered. I'm probably going to skip the middle bit just because to give more time for kind of feedback on your actual work. So also feel free to just let us know kind of which sections you've done. I know, Darren, you already did that in your email. But so Jolene, we'll play yours and we'll just sort of start from the beginning. So let's give some support to Jolene in the chat because she says she's nervous. So, okay guys, I'm gonna play from the beginning now.
Why, Sylph?
Maybe she's just fiddling with her hair. It can be so obsessive. Don't. She's trying really hard.
Jenna.
What?
So why don't we stop there for now.
Is that just as it's gone into the bathroom scene with the...
Yeah, so we're at about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Minutes in.
Cool.
Cool. Very nice work. Very nice theme.
Good job, Jolene.
Yeah, very nice. It felt like a very classical kind of approach.
Cool. So I guess Vicky, why don't we kind of hand it over to you to start? I mean, it's also must be interesting for you to hear a completely different take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, no, it was very interesting. And yeah, I was just saying it has a very kind of classic approach with a lot of strings and, you know, felt very emotive and quite dramatic. I mean, I think I'd probably even like to watch it again potentially, but I like the way once the birthday cake scene comes in, it kind of pairs back a bit, and then it becomes a bit more hopeful and a little bit of relief. But I would say I'd probably still want a bit more of a contemplative, sad undertone and a bit more of an undercurrent instead of it being too hopeful.
Cool. And I guess just to kind of piggyback that, what about it, sort of what's going on in the narrative that would make you feel like you want it to be a bit more contemplative at this point?
Just because it's not quite at the hopeful phase yet, I think, of the story. So this is still quite an anxious moment. And even though, you know, she is kind of overcoming some of what we later find out, is kind of the audience don't know that yet. So I would suggest, you know, because she's still in this moment on her own, away from her family, she's isolated, and we haven't seen why she's struggling yet. It's kind of like, it's, I don't know, I think it needs to kind of like signal that it is about to go into struggle, and then once she starts looking at the photos, you know, it would kind of signify that moment into the darker side of her thoughts and psyche.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I think that's really helpful feedback on that. Um, what do you think we should do next? Do you want to have another watch through that, or do you want to jump through kind of the next bit, and then maybe we could also go back to this beginning and see it kind of all in context?
Yeah, let's do that. Jump to the next bit.
Okay, so we're at about 6 minutes is where the next part jumps to.
Oh! Oh my gosh, you're going bald. You struck out.
Mate, she's a fucking freak.
I can't believe I'm even touching it. She's going bald. Put it back. Disgusting.
She's been doing it for years, pulling her own hair out. Fuck. Why didn't you tell me it was so bad? You know it's not gonna grow back if you're not careful.
Who even does that?
I just feel fucking
So...
I've just wrapped that up. So very nicely done. There we go. Very nice work.
Beautiful. Really, really lovely instrumentation.
Cool. So I've got a couple ideas, but again, Vicky, I'll sort of give it to you first.
Cool. Well, I was just going to say, from the sort of hat being thrown around and the sort of abstract sounds that came in, I thought that fit really, really well. And again, it just fit her psyche of what she was feeling, and it was all like a bit wonky and discombobulating and unnerving. So I think you captured that, Jolene, really well. And then it kind of goes back into the sort of bit more classical instrumentation, but I really liked the use of the sort of deep bassy sounds, because again, it's kind of like throws you a bit off kilter, and keeps that momentum of that moment, which I thought was really nice. And then, yeah, when she's running, does anyone want to chime in with anything on that bit?
I think one kind of overall comment I'd make about it is I think your spotting is pretty much dead on. I think kind of where you choose to make certain shifts in the music is really appropriate, and it's very clear that where you're sort of trying to direct our attention. I think sometimes the only it could be maybe a little smoother or more subtle, because sometimes, and I think kind of on the technical level, if you shift harmony, that kind of brings a lot of attention to something. If you change and introduce a new melody, that brings a lot of attention to something. If you change the sort of style or the language, the harmonic language, that brings attention. So sometimes I think you're doing kind of all of those things at the same point, and it's essentially like putting a spotlight on that moment. Where I think if you take some of these ideas and maybe stagger them a little bit, it'll help smooth it over a little bit more, kind of like watercolors drifting from one to the next. And that'll keep your ideas where they are. And I think, again, the spotting makes a lot of sense and is very clear. It'll just help smooth those transitions through so that the music can kind of ebb and flow a little bit more.
See, I feel with this moment I'm talking about, it kind of it did that a little bit more maybe than in other places, because it was kind of abstract and then it became classical, and then but it continued with a bit of the abstract theme. So I felt like that maybe wasn't as jarring, but I like the idea what you're talking about, Mike, maybe introducing some of the next theme or where you're going within where you're currently at, so it kind of flows into it a bit better.
I had the same thought. Yeah, what you said, Mike, about the spotting, like everywhere you had music, there needed to be music, but it was, for me, it was like abrupt transitions. It was like suddenly you're very aware that there's music, and it's finding a way to smooth that and to sand off those hard edges a little bit. I thought as well, treating it like you're putting your dubbing hat on at the end of this, and you've got to be kind of brutal to your own music, because there are some moments where well, in the dubbing, kind of with the dubbing hat on, there are some moments where I think you need to be a bit more brutal to your music. Like the one I'm thinking of is like the first breakfast scene. You've got some piano music going on there that feels just a little bit in the way. So a dubbing mix is going to compress the shit out of that and put it really low. So just be aware that that kind of thing would happen. And the flip side of that is, I think you can have more conviction in, you know, if you're going to do something. I agree with Mike that you're doing a lot to kind of to make our thoughts complex about what's happening. So that's through harmony and other things. But I think when you have a specific musical idea, you can have more conviction in it. I think there were some moments where the music can sing out and can be more of a thing. Like there was one moment where was it? It was in the sort of latter part, and I think you had some recorders and flutes, and I sort of went, ooh. And as soon as an audience member's like, and I thought you could have gone either way with that. You could have cut it out and it would have been better for it, or you could have lifted it up and it would have been better for it, because it was just somewhere in the middle, and it just lacked a bit of conviction. I think that's just a confidence thing as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I had kind of the same thoughts. I thought your spotting was on point. Well done.
I was
think
gonna.
go on.
Alan.
Okay. Well, I think the spotting was spot on as well. I think everywhere the music was, it needed music. I think it's great music. The only general comment would be it's maybe too much. It's doing a lot when it could be doing a lot less, achieving the same result, in my opinion. It could be also, for example, at the beginning, the music's great, but we're in her bedroom. The sun's coming in through the window. She's like pulling on this one single hair, and the music is great in terms of notes and harmony and everything. But if that was like triple P pianissimo or bisbigliando on the strings, super soft and quiet, in my opinion, would have would have made much more of an impact. And I mean, as I said, music's great. Sometimes less is more. Yeah.
I was gonna say basically the same thing. I really love everything from a musical point of view. When we put the music in the context of the picture, I thought that specifically the first cue and the last cue were maybe a little bit intense. And I think, you know what, it can be something that you fix with the orchestration, with the choices of like how many instruments and how much they're doing in those passages. It can be a matter of dynamics, as Ale was suggesting. I think to go back to also what Sam was referencing, it's always useful, I think, to try to already picture in your head the final mix, the final dub, and to compose accordingly. And I mean, this is obviously a rule that can be broken. Just take a look at what John Powell does in the intro for How to Train Your Dragon, for example, which is a super intense cue, and there's a lot of narration. So, you know, if you have the most amazing engineers and everything, you can do whatever you want. But in the context of these productions, I think if you know there's going to be sound effects and dialogues, and like that will obviously affect the way you compose for a scene when there's a lot of narration, a lot of dialogues. And the trickiest thing is when you have moments of like action, so like people hugging and sharing, just like, you know, they're looking at each other, and then moments of dialogues, because maybe you want to do something very uplifting with the music, but then there's like this one line of dialogue, and you gotta suddenly go down a little bit. So it can be very tricky. But if you're smart with the choices of orchestration and like how much the instruments are doing, you can work around this. I also wanted to say one more thing. I know maybe next week is going to be better for this. Is the mixing next week, Mike? Am I correct?
So we're gonna swap. We'll explain it at the end, but we're gonna do
okay, cool.
next
week.
So
anyway, this may be more related to the mixing sort of episode we're gonna do. But I thought in general, from a production point of view, I'm sorry if this is gonna be slightly boring for Vicky to hear, but I'm gonna try to put on my producer's hat. I thought that everything was a tiny bit too dry for me. There were specifically some instruments which were sounding kind of fake because of the lack of ambience and reverb that they had. There was like the flutes that Sam was talking about. I think you also go, ooh, because not only they're very low, but they're also very, very dry, and they don't blend together with the rest much. And there was also, whenever you use, Jolene, the sort of pitched piano, or like there was something like a keyboard instrument which was pitched, detuned. I thought it was very, very dry. And if you choose to use such a peculiar instrument, which is gonna stand out by itself because it's pitched, because it's weird, it's quirky, it's you need to make sure that you, I think, blend it perfectly with the rest. I thought there was a very big distance between that and the rest of the ensemble. Another thing that I noticed, I'm sorry, I'm just reading off some comments that I made, the list that I made. There was a pattern with strings, something like this at 624. It was, I think, winds and strings, and it was like a very beautiful effect. And I think a cliche for that kind of pattern is to hear it not only going up and down with dynamics, but you can have a lot of fun with the panning of that part, and the reverb. You can have it going from much more reverb, or like actually increase the reverb and then decrease it, make it go from the left to the right. It was a very beautiful effect, but I had the impression it was just staying there for too long, and it wasn't adding a lot after a while. If you're gonna keep it, you can try to move it or like keep it interesting in some way with mixing, panning, reverbs, and blah blah blah. And last thing that I wrote was that the piano on the third cue started just a split second after all the rest of the audio went down. Now, I don't know if this was because of the fact that you had to take off some music and other stuff, Michael, but again, picture the final product. If there's dialogue and sound effects and then suddenly go down, it's important that the music kind of doesn't start all of a sudden and with a second of sudden silence, because otherwise everyone's going to notice that there's music coming in, and this would distract you from, you know, the film. It's going to kind of make the magic of cinema or of film go away. You don't want to, you always want to try to come in and not make people realize that you're coming in with the music. So I thought if the cue had started just a split second earlier, even with a pad or some strings or something, it would have been slightly more faded in. And to me, it felt like, oh, okay, there's music now, and there wasn't before. These were all the comments that I wrote down.
Can I ask a question? What you mean by dry, just in terms of technical?
Dry as in, so obviously when you work with fake instruments, with libraries, you are not hearing them in their natural ambience. They are recorded and they can sound as if they were playing like this in front of your nose. So what we do when we work with, when we create music, when we produce music, is we need to work very carefully with reverb and with all those effects that make them sound as if they are in a nice ambient and
Right.
recording.
They're fuller.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these cues, well, the typical sound of film music is quite reverby and quite like it's usually recorded in big rooms. And I think, most of the mixes were quite dry, as in it sounded as if they were recorded in a very small room and you had all the instruments super close to you, which can make you feel slightly uncomfortable.
What I'd say is sort of more important to that is that it's not so much that everything is just dry, because you could have something that sounds dry. It's more that some was drier than others, so it didn't sound cohesive.
Exactly.
So essentially, we use reverb to create so that every sound sounds like it's coming from the same room, from the same space, and you can kind of hear the distance between them. And that's what will make it sound also a lot smoother in the mix.
I did have some things I was going to say, but Vincenzo basically said everything that was possible. So I'll real quick try to say something that somebody hasn't already been said. As you know, everybody's already said the music was great. This spotted really well. My favorite bit was the detuned Celeste, and I think you could have really explored that a little bit more. Same thing with the recorders, because for me, it almost felt like from section to section, it felt like we were almost watching a different film in a way. And I think there's a better way of unifying that through your color choices and orchestration, like that recorder bit and the detuned Celeste bit. I mean, if you use those in context with the others to make it a more uniform color palette, I feel like everything would fit together a little bit more. Even at the beginning, which it felt almost too upbeat and too forward moving. I think even just taking out the left hand of the piano, the constant rhythmic drive, and just putting a synth pad or something texturally underneath there, but keeping the melody would be really effective, because when you have this sort of constant piano rhythm, it feels like it's pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, when in fact it feels like the actual visual, it sort of needs to be a lot more reflective and still. And so just trying to get cohesiveness between those individual sections, even though obviously we're not restricted by using live players, so you can use whatever instrument you want. I think being selective with your color choices and then using those specific choices in a smart and clever way would be a really effective way to make the score sort of fit together a little bit more.
Nice comments. Yeah, so interesting hearing all your perspectives. It's giving me a lot of food for thought.
Can I just quickly add that we've been very nitpicking into it, but obviously, Jillian, the music was absolutely beautiful, and you did a terrific job. So we're going very in the specifics, but I think that's why we're here. But let's not forget it was a very good job.
Yeah, it was. It's beautiful. My main thought was that, as an overarching feeling, was that it felt like it was, very classical instrumentation that I would have heard on a film from the 50s almost, and it felt quite grand. And since this is a bit more of an intimate story that's a bit small, it felt like it almost didn't quite fit, even though I thought it was very pretty. So one of you was saying that, if it was a bit pared back, it would have been a bit more in keeping with where we were at. And I guess, because it's a contemporary story, I think it was really interesting to see the juxtaposition of what it would be like if it was made in the 50s, but it's not. So it's kind of like, it felt like the instrumentation didn't quite ever reflect, apart from that sort of abstract moment when the hat's being thrown around a little bit, it didn't quite reflect the context of the story and the world the characters live in. But I really enjoyed seeing that juxtaposition. But yeah, maybe if like some of the things were stripped out, it would have worked better for me, I think. Hope that makes sense.
Cool. I think we're already kind of halfway through, so we should jump ahead to Darren's next.
Yes.
And we'll just try to.
We're also getting a couple more links.
Yeah, we've got one from Davide, so we'll try to go through. I also don't want to kind of cut anyone short, but we'll just try to be a little be succinct with the feedback too. Yeah. So Darren, yours next. Let me just double check on your email, the one that you sent about kind of, so I can get the timings and that is. So we're gonna start from the beginning up to kind of 142. It's more or less the same as the last one. So then kind of we'll jump ahead to sort of like 540 to the end. And why don't we just watch both of these sections all the way through so we can see all of Darren's work. Cool.
Myself?
Maybe she's just fiddling with her hair. It can be so obsessive. Don't. She's trying really hard.
Kelly, what a Casanova! And you, silly little minx. Oh! Oh my gosh, you're going bald.
What the fuck? Are you diseased or something? Come on, man. You struck out? Mate, she's a fucking freak.
I can't believe I've been touching her. She's going bald.
Put it back.
Disgusting.
She's been doing it for years, pulling her own hair out. Fuck. Why didn't you tell me it was so bad? You know it's not gonna grow back if you're not careful.
Who even does that?
I just feel fucking
Self.
Cool. Very nice work, Darren. I think this has also seen kind of leaps and bounds from last week. You've really kind of taken everything on board that we were talking about in the last stream. And I think all of those things, it's very smooth now. And I think the ideas that you had initially, especially kind of this thread of the guitar coming through, is a lot more clear now.
Can I just say that regarding also to what we were saying a few minutes ago, I really think you did a terrific job, Darren, with the palette that you choose. The music is very coherent and cohesive. Like it sounds like you. It's always useful to set yourself a series of sounds, of tools, and then use them, exploit them, and create a world within the world of the film. And I think you did a brilliant job with that. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I second that definitely. It felt like there was a definite vibe which reflected the atmosphere, and it was a little bit more in tune with the context and feeling. And I felt like it's not actually, although it was very different, it was also had a lot of similarities to what Mike and I did together in a sense. So there was kind of more modern sounds, and I really loved the atmosphere that was created. And yeah, I also really noticed, and not in a bad way, but I appreciated the themes and instrument choice that kind of came full circle in the end. And yeah, I really like that choice of guitars and stuff like that. So they're my overarching thoughts. I could go into some more specifics, but does anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I thought it was a really nice, sorry, Sam, do you want to go ahead? Okay, I'll go. A really nice, as Vincenzo said, choice of sounds and colors. And it was especially great with, I think, the subtle transitions between, camera shots and even just subtle looks between people. It was really great how much close attention you paid to that. The thing I also really did like is the fact that when you chose to use acoustic instruments, they were used in a very unique way. Like, for example, especially the guitar percussion banging on the back of the guitar when she's running away. It was really nice and created sort of this otherworldly sound because, synths, it's very modern. We don't have this ingrained sort of association with what they necessarily mean, just because it's used in so many different contexts, and you use that to your advantage, and then sort of took a guitar which has the potential to be very cliche, and then how you end up using it, and then flipped it on its head and used it in a unique and in different way, which I really appreciated. And I also appreciated as well the use of the space because there was a certain point where you had a guitar that had a ton of reverb put on it very far away. And that was a really nice color as well. There was a lot of depth of field and width there as well, which was a really nice listening experience.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Darren, I thought that was really fab. I thought you nailed it, and I personally really appreciated the improvements you made to that last cue from last week. We mentioned that it felt kind of abrupt with that 3-note synth chord coming straight in, and you've softened that beautifully. It makes so much sense now. I thought your middle cue just after she leaves was a triumph. I thought that was like spot on. It was so interesting and yet understated at the same time. I'm going to be nitpicky because I always am, but my only thoughts were there's one moment at like 8 minutes where you've got the guitar effects, but you've also got a guitar sort of playing a more melodic pattern, and they were both dry. And I just thought that if you made the more melodic one a bit wetter, it would make a bit more sense against the kind of scratchy guitar sounds. A tiny thing, but that was just a thought I had.
Sam, sorry, since I wanted to say one thing exactly on this, can I super quickly pose you? I think that specifically for that point, what I noticed is that compared to all the other guitars, it was the more melodic one, which you can think of it as a solo instrument in the orchestra, and it's perfect to have it there in the center. But if you have a guitar that does a more slightly rhythm guitar pattern, I think, and that was the only bit that I noticed, it felt like it was for some reason in the middle and very thin. Super easy thing, just double it, left and right. If you have a virtual instrument, maybe change the phase so they don't fall back into mono. And just having two guitars doing the same thing, but you build a wall, you're differentiating the element. You have the soloist, the instrument in the middle, and then a tiny bit of body on the two sides, and it just creates a beautiful natural chorus and beautiful effect.
Absolutely. My only other thought, Darren, was for me in that first scene, just in terms of what the music's telling us to feel, it just felt a little bit hand-holdy. And what I mean by that is you have this lovely opening cue, which really sets us up. Then they have this breakfast scene, and then everything that happens in that dialogue, you kind of tell us what to think. Like it goes slightly sinister when they start talking about where she might be, and then those things kind of happen, and then we get back to her in the room, and then it's the pleasant music when she's crossing off another day on the calendar. That for me just felt like we don't want to know that much yet. We need to let everything tell us that as we go through the film. And I just think that was just doing slightly too much. You could almost swap that around and have it just turn slightly more ambiguous towards the end, but to have it in the middle just felt a bit like too much too soon. It felt too prologue-y, and there's not time for that, you know. But in terms of the musical content and the latter part of the film, I thought it was fab, really well done.
Vicki, we'd love your kind of nitpicky details.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really loved the space that was created, as I think, yeah, that was mentioned already, but when it goes into the kitchen scene after the first scene and they're like, where's Sylv? I just really enjoyed the fact that there was some breathing room, and I think that's important. Instead of laying things really thick with score all the time, it's pull it back, you know, give it space to breathe. That was really nice. Yeah, I thought, I've just got random little notes here, very internal, bit more contemporary, repeating themes, which I've said. I thought it builds really nicely when she's at the calendar, and I quite liked the fact that the sort of abstract segue worked into her going into her flicking in the phone and the pictures. So I just think it sort of, you know, you were obviously very conscious of what else was going on and the diegetic music, and I thought the score kind of complemented it and just sort of flowed quite seamlessly in and out of it, especially when they're doing the hat, throwing the hat around. Yeah, the theme that was, you know, quite striking to me was also when she's running outside. I think you mentioned with the sort of tapping on the guitar, back of the guitar or something, that was very haunting. And yeah, I liked it, but I don't know how cohesive it was with everything else, but then it did pop out at me quite, you know, like it was quite arresting in a sense. Yeah, it's hard, I didn't write a time code. Yeah, I found when she's actually after the party and she's now in her bathroom, I felt like it was very, very haunting and pared back, but it felt like it could have been pushed a little bit further to increase her sense of isolation. But once that moment of frenzied sort of abstract string noises came in, I thought that was brilliant and reflected that really nice, and it had a really, really good crescendo to it. And again, I just thought it was nice once we're back in the bedroom, you know, it's still very internal and stripped back. But yeah, again, potentially it could have had a little bit more tension because she's still struggling at that moment where she's like fiddling with the beads. And I just felt like, you know, it could have been maybe heightened a little bit more to, yeah, again, just up the stakes, because we don't quite know if she's going to fall off the wagon and start pulling again, or it's going to resolve. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, once her mum's knocking at the door, I found the cue became quite creepy, and it didn't quite get to the resolution in the right way for me, I don't think. It didn't feel like it sort of segued into the resolution. So once she's downstairs, it felt, you know, tense, and then the relief comes, but maybe the relief could have come a little bit earlier, because it just still felt tense, and maybe that music would have worked a bit better, or that sort of atmosphere when she's still struggling with the beads in her room, sort of thing. Yeah, so I really loved the melodies at the end, and I've just said, yeah, I really like the way it kind of goes full circle and goes into a similar theme and instrumentation as the opening. It just felt very, very cohesive, and beautiful, sort of hopeful feeling of, you know, light at the end of the tunnel, which is what I wanted. So yeah, really good job. Really hope those, you know, give you some idea of moments that really worked and then others that could have gone slightly different, you know, direction. But overall, I thought it was a really good job.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's really, really nice feedback to go into the details on all that. Darren, I'll just say kind of one last thing on that. I'm a huge fan of the sort of fret noise while she's pulling the hair out. I thought that was an incredibly creative use of sound design and very effective. And I think also as someone who knows you and your music quite well, I think this is something that for you personally and your style really lean into these ideas because you have these wonderful creative ideas. And I've seen it come through in a few of your works and some of the works we've shown on the stream before as well. Definitely, I think that is a great sort of part of your style, is that, you know, to try and kind of come up with these creative solutions. So it's really effective the way that you put that together.
Yeah, I love that moment as well. It's brilliant.
So I would love to jump on to Alessandro's piece next, and also real quick, Vicki, kind of how are you on time? Because we've got 9 minutes. We can. We also have Davide submitted some work too. We can, if you have to go, we can also kind of stay on the stream and give some feedback as well.
I'm fine for time. I just might need a toilet break.
Cool.
And Mike, Lara was asking us if we managed to get her link because she was having issues with the connection. Did we manage to get her link?
Is it in the email or was it dropped into the? Because I don't see it in the chat. I think easiest thing would be to drop it in the chat again. It might be on YouTube. I'm looking on Twitch.
Okay, will you bear with me? I'm going to run off, so I'll be back
Sure.
in 2 secs.
Yeah, go for it. Cool, that's great. We won't be super rushed then.
Okay.
So why don't we grab Lara's link in the
Well,
meantime?
then, if I can, because I thought we were finishing at 9, so I had one thing to say for Darren's piece, which I loved. I loved the way he used the guitar as a kind of a sound designy instrument. That was great. I have just one thing to say, one criticism. I would have liked when at the end of the flashback, when we go back to her room, I would have liked kind of a reminder of the opening scene in the music, kind of more, maybe more in a tense way, kind of a tension situation. But yeah, there wasn't enough there to recall what was going on in the music in the opening scene. So I just was wondering if it was a choice or I don't know, it just happened.
Can I, since we're waiting for Vicky, I'm just gonna say two other things then. I noticed, Darren, that there was kind of a missed opportunity, in my opinion, at 1 minute and 4 seconds, 1 minute 5 seconds. There's like, the piano comes in just after the mom finishes talking, but like literally a split second later, there's a change of shot. There's a different scene, and we go back to the main character and her inner struggles. And I thought for me it was kind of a bit of a missed opportunity, because you could have had the piano just come in with that change of shot to highlight the change of scene, the change of thoughts were going in. Sometimes it's nice to have an instrument just signaling a different headspace. And the other thing is just to keep in mind, sometimes it can be risky to have two different musical elements overlapping each other. And in the scene when it's revealed that she's been pulling her hair all this time at the party, there's like the diegetic music, which is still going, and then you keep some pads, some things that are slightly moving, and it's not like it doesn't work. Actually, they do it all the time, and it's nice. It's just something that you need to be careful with, and maybe sometimes discuss it with the director first. Like if the director already plays some diegetic music there, and you still want to keep your cue going, it's always useful to say, "Hey, I'm gonna do this." Little heads up. Also, because the sound designer, or like actually who does the final mixing, the dub, will have to deal with like two different sets of music and blend them and balance them together. So yeah, just to keep in mind.
Cool. Shall we jump on to Alessandro's next? And Lara, I just made a comment. If you're still struggling to drop your link in the chat, feel free to just drop it on our Facebook page. Just go to the most recent post and drop it there, and one of us can grab it and kind of share it with the rest of us. That'll probably be easiest.
And this is the one that you sent on our chat, Mike, that we downloaded.
Yes.
Yeah.
The 3-minute one, right?
Yes. Cool. So Alessandro, while we play through this, feel free to write in the chat and just give us, any kind of context that might be helpful. So, and I'll start playing now. Cool. Very nice work. Cool.
Can I go ahead and hop in before I forget what I'm going to say? Is that all right?
Sure. Michael first.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I particularly like the color change at the very end when she's back in her room and the sun's streaming through the window. That was a really nice ethereal texture between the solo violin, the synths, and the cello solo. I thought that was really nice. Now, before that, when the first cue started, I thought, oh yeah, this is great. There's some really cool percussion effects happening, but for me, it quickly got too big too soon, to a certain extent, and sounded a little bit, I'm sorry to say this, but a little bit too sort of Hans Zimmer-y, sort of action film score. And the thing is, I think in some ways the orchestration choices have to reflect the scale of the film. Of course, there are ways that you can subvert that. Like obviously, if there's a big action scene and suddenly a solo piano comes in, that's an effect that might be what, a director is going for. But in this case, because it's such an intimate story effectively, happening within her own head, I think that having this big sort of action cue that feels like it could be out of any average blockbuster is not the right choice. Now, musically speaking, I think it was fine if you were able to scale it down to a much more intimate level and maintain that sort of that forward momentum. But purely just the space and size of it became distracting at a certain point, to the where it almost came off as I really hate using this term, but a little bit cheesy at some points. If you were able to scale back the instrumentation to maybe some sort of chamber ensemble with the same sort of music and find interesting ways to bring out the aspects of the music that you still had in there, that forward momentum, I think you would have a lot more success in terms of having it line up with what's going on in the film.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, because for me it was very, very beautiful, but it felt like I, wanted to close my eyes and visualize big landscapes or being across the sea or just much bigger visuals. So for me, it didn't quite reflect the internal, intimate nature of the story. And again, yeah, I think less is more. And when there were moments where it was pared back, like with the piano cues more at the end, and maybe because the piano cues were almost a little bit familiar to what we had already, I really liked that. But I felt like, if anything, it could have just been pared back to some integral moments or instrumentation that works with what you were doing, but creating atmosphere in another way. Instead of using all the instruments, it's kind of creating other bits of atmosphere which maybe would have contemporized it again. But yeah, maybe just using a couple of choices of instruments would have reflected more what she was feeling.
Yeah, I had exactly the same thoughts, guys. I mean, for me, like I loved your music, Alessandra. I thought it was, and it sounded great as well. Like if you present that to a director, they're going to be impressed. That middle cue, or rather that initial cue, for me, it's that difference between size and energy. And what you've got is a lot of size with a lot of energy, but you can still have a lot of energy without the size. And I think what Vicky and Michael were both saying is that this film, it's not got that scale that calls for a huge, size music. And I think that's where it felt disjunct to us. I think, if it were, I think, that was it for me. It was like a setting thing, I guess, is the best way of thinking of it. And more than anything, is that it felt out of place because it was so grandiose, and it was almost overselling the issues that we're meant to be kind of associating here. But as I say, I think, and I really liked your last cue. I thought, and I thought that was really close for me. It was, for me, it was just that the kind of disturbing scene just became not disturbing. It became too epic. It was like epic, wasn't it?
I think that the effect that it does when you have this, when you pair like a scene with such a cue, to me it felt like a little bit misleading, as if, I don't know, you were the music leads you somewhere, and it was almost like leading you to think, oh, she's gonna like snap and kill somebody. Like the proportion, the scale, the kind of emotional vibe that it gives can sort of point you in a certain direction, which is actually not the one that you're trying to go with the actual narrative of the film. And but yeah, as everybody,
like she was big, like she was about to become John Wick, and
yeah, exactly.
Off the path.
It's like I think, yeah, that's the thing. It's as if it tells a different story than the actual image.
No, just to be clear, I mean, I love the music. I mean, it's really well produced.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say about the last cue was great, sounded great. The only thing sonically that disturbed me a little bit, it was like the right field was a little bit too heavy. Like the cello was already on the right, and the piano was panned to the right, so the left field was kind of heavy. And yeah, and we all agree on the first cue. Sounds beautiful. It's just, it's not the right intensity, because the scene doesn't actually require that, as Sam says, that size. That it's too actiony, but it sounds great.
Can I actually add something that I was gonna say? I think you feel this even more so because you change from like a Hans Zimmery sort of like action cue to a very beautiful second cue, which is based on a piano, which is very intimate, very soft, very pure, but also very close. And the sudden change of like scale from like a closed piano coming from a big orchestra, a big cinematic orchestra, is even more. Oh my god, it's like it feels like a bit of a shock. And in regards to this, I would also add something in the second cue, which I think is absolutely beautiful and touching. I would have probably tried to use either a slightly smaller string section or maybe a slightly smaller ambient. Um, just because I think the piano was very, very beautiful. But again, you could hear a bit of a difference between the very intimate and close piano and the strings, which are still like a full string orchestra recorded in air, because that's usually what you get with libraries nowadays. Well, if you can find like a chamber string patch, or like you can reduce the ambient, it would blend even better with the piano, and it would convey even more this feeling of intimacy of like smaller scale, which is I think more coherent with the story that
I mean, even if you wanted to go smaller than chamber orchestra, just doing like a string quartet or something could be really nice.
Absolutely.
Like a really, really effective way of doing that.
There you go.
Guys, can I say, because I don't think it's just the size, because I don't think that it's necessarily that if you just make it smaller that it would then work. I think it's also that it's a difference of perspective. So I think from that first cue, I think a lot of it is still relevant, and kind of paring things back could achieve this and sort of give you the same effect. But I think that it's from the music is playing from the point of view of the audience watching Sylvie and sort of seeing her as an outsider rather than what she feels. So I think that's very important to kind of consider, is whose point of view are you writing the music from? So if you're writing it from Sylvie's point of view, then would she have this kind of very energetic and something that's sort of moving and chugging along? I think if we were watching this, if we were a bystander at the party and we were watching this and feeling bad for her.
Well, you were.
I was, and so was Kevin Penkin. That we would feel that for her. I think that could be the right approach if the point of view was to take from the audience. And so, for instance, maybe if Sylvie was a minor character, then we wouldn't be from her point of view, and this could be an appropriate approach. But I think in this instance, that's where it's from her point of view, and I think that might be something that could help kind of guide that, where then everybody here felt that second cue was more effective because I think it was then from her point of view. So I think then it takes it kind of from inside her head. So I think I agree with what everybody said about it, but I think paring that back would also help you achieve kind of taking it from her sort of intimate point of view, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And for me, that whole story and the films I like to make are very, very internal and from the character's perspective. But, even that last cue, I loved it, and I think it's nice the way it should kind of unfold into being from her perspective, but to the audience as well. So it's got to kind of flow into something that everyone else can relate to as well, that resolves the story for everyone. So I thought that last cue worked really well in that way. But yeah, for me, it was very epic, and it kind of made me feel or think about horror movies like Carrie. And I think Jolene, her attempt as well, made me think of films like Carrie, where they're much bigger stories and you've got bigger settings, and it's in a big school and there's lots of characters and a overarching scary mother, whereas this is just like one girl and her psyche. So yeah, I think everyone's comments have been spot on. Really nice.
That's another thing of which I can say kind of all of us experienced sort of while we were in college and sort of coming out of college, is learning to write less. Kind of like a lot of it's really easy to want to sort of show what you're trying to convey. And I think it was told to me when I was in college, it's like, you're gonna look back on your music 5 years from now and think about like, man, I was trying so hard to say this one thing. And so I think it is a hard thing to kind of go with, but I think it will come more naturally kind of the more you do it, just to sort of like, okay, find the appropriate level. And again, just to sort of say for everybody, all caveats included, everything's fantastic. And I think it's especially Alessandro, that was very well produced. The demos sound amazing. So this is, we're giving kind of all the nitpicky feedback because that's what you want out of this.
Yeah.
There was one other thing, guys, as well, just before we move on, because I think it's really interesting about Alessandro's, and I'd be interested to hear Vicky's thoughts on this. The other two that we heard, maybe I'm assuming too much as to how this short clip is cut, but the music stops at the very point at which the other two composers kind of opened out, because it's the moment where we have that resolution to her story. And actually, I'm sort of assuming that you deliberately bring the music out there, Alessandro. Please say if that's wrong, but I think that's a really interesting decision, because it's like this release. You're not trying to have that resolution musically. It's a very brave decision to take the music out at the climax of the film, the moment where she's about to take her hat off. And I think that's a really nice thing. I kind of hope that's what you've done. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you think there, Vicky, whether you would assume it needs the music there, or whether actually that's
not necessarily. No, I think it is a brave choice, and it just, again, it's nice to have those moments of space and relief from people, or whatever the filmmakers, composers, any of us are trying to do, which is like tell people what to feel. Kind of just allows that moment to land on its own, I think, which is really good.
Cool. Should we jump ahead?
Yes.
We've got so let's do Davide's next. I'm gonna put the link in our Zoom chat now, just in case you guys missed it. So this is, I also put Lara's link previously at 9:05 in our chat. So let's do the one that I just sent. We'll watch that next. Once again, congratulations to everyone who's shown work. I think this is, what I love about what we can, what we want to do with these streams is that you guys also get to see each other's work. So it's really, it's not comparing sort of one person against another. It's let's look at all of our work together and see what we can take from each of those.
Which one are we looking at? The 9:12 one you said?
Yes.
9:12.
See if I can scale this up on my, but apologies if this is a little small for viewers. Got it on my okay, and Davide, if you want to give us any kind of indications of your approach or anything, also just timings, if there's a specific spot that we should be looking for, that'd be really helpful. And Lara, the same, just you can kind of write that in the chat now when you get a chance. So I'll swap over now. Okay. I'm just going to double check.
I'm not hearing any music.
Yeah, it may be, I think maybe we should download it, because I think what's happened is, especially sometimes if it's exported out of Logic, it sometimes exports the audio in separate layers. So then when you put it into a player like G Drive, it will only play the first audio layer.
It definitely works downloaded.
Yeah, so let's all just download that.
I was appreciating
Mike, if you don't mind
the John
putting
Cage
it-
approach.
Sorry?
I was about to say that, and also
Sorry for ruining your joke.
Mike, if you don't mind putting both of them into the WhatsApp chat.
Sure.
Cheers.
Yeah, just while we're downloading, again, I guess I wanted to echo about how talented everyone is. And I can imagine, wanting to show all your tools and skills and, appreciation and for the things you've learned, you know, at this point. But yeah, I guess it's always about coming back to the story, always serving the story. And that's what I constantly have to teach myself as well with directing. It's kind of like never being too ostentatious with camera moves, sound design, score, you know, if it's not serving the story, just to kind of show off in a sense.
Guys, since we have one moment while we're downloading the clip, I've actually already watched Davide, so I'm all caught up for when you guys are ready. I just wanted to go back and say one quick thing to Alessandro Giovanetto. Alessandro, I don't know if you are in RCM. Maybe Mike, do you know? Is he from RCM?
He's a first-year master student.
Okay, I don't know if Howard Davidson is still teaching, but if he is,
Yes,
Alessandro, try to get some lessons with Howard, because he was my teacher in the second year in college, and I think the biggest teaching that I got, the biggest thing that I learned in my second year working with Howard was how to scale things, because I used to overwrite all the time, just compose Hans Zimmer cues for everything. And one of the biggest challenges working with Howard was like learning how to scale things down. And like he made me work on some very weird clips, like black and white stuff or super like small, intimate, and it just teaches you how to proportion your orchestration, your writing to what the basically the picture is already suggesting you, the scale, the music, the tone, everything. It's just like he's terrific with this stuff. So try to get some lessons with him if you can.
Cool. Okay, I've got this ready now. Downloaded. So I'll swap that over and we'll play. And it's just the one scene. So great. I'll play that now.
What's the file name of that one? Sorry.
Pulling Lock Picture soundtrack.mov.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, guys, I moved something, so let me play it beginning again. Cool.
Nice.
Work on that. Vicki, would you like to jump in? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, very beautiful. Loved it. I've just written nice instruments, great atmosphere, lovely melody, very haunting. My main criticism, I guess, would be that it doesn't quite build in tension as much as it needs to when she's having the flashbacks and pulling her hair out. Kind of felt kind of similar, you know, trajectory the whole way. But I loved the crescendo at the end. It was good.
Yeah, I think one very nice job kind of how this has been realized from your very initial idea last week that you showed. So Vicki, just for context, last week Davide showed us kind of like a 20-second clip of an idea that was just a sort of thematic idea. And it was also, it was very broad, and you've really taken those notes on board to make this much more suited for that specific mood. So very nice job kind of taking all that on board. I would say essentially the same thing, and that it's pretty static throughout, And what I'd offer as advice is to think of this as kind of the arc of that scene. So if you sort of step back for a moment and think, okay, in this kind of minute 15, what do I want to achieve? You know, what narratively needs to happen? So she goes from running out to the point that she is sort of breaking down and her mom has to stop her. So think of that, about that as an arc, and then you could almost step away from the picture and just write the music and think, okay, this is one consistent build.
Mm-hmm.
So if I then create a consistent build in the music, once I place it to the picture, it's pretty much just going to work.
I think
I agree 100%.
Yeah, and I think you can really clearly perceive, like halfway through the thing, halfway through the cue, I think the harmonic progression, or even just like even the melody, starts repeating again, and that kind of overlaps for the moment where the flashbacks start to intensify. So it would have been perfect to, when you start repeating the progression, just build up with the orchestration, maybe add some percussion and add something which kind of creates a bit more of an engine and puts a bit more pressure on to reflect what's going on in the picture, and like the building of the anxiety, the flashbacks. And one other thing that I wanted to say is that when you have reversed piano at the end of a cue, which is one of those solutions that we often use, and it's just brilliant and everything, I think it's kind of like sorry if this is too explicit, kind of like an interrupted orgasm. Like when you hear the reverse piano building up, but then you don't hear the yep, because the reverse piano usually cuts very clearly. You can really hear the yep when it ends, and I think it was missing a little bit of that. It's beautiful to have the reverb, the delay on the reverb piano to kind of fade out the cue, but it really felt like it missed that yep moment where it just drops down to me.
So you're saying it basically went all the way. It wasn't interrupted at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So I get why you would want a full orgasm, but when you have reverse piano, interrupt the orgasm.
Okay. Musical blue balls.
I had so I don't know, David, if you know Johan Johansson. For me, this had a very Johan Johansson vibe, but twice the tempo. Because Johan Johansson's thing was slow build and really boldly doing very little. And this kind of does that, but you have this kind of dream piano going throughout that actually has quite a quick tempo, a quick sense of pulse. And I think if you're gonna draw back the pulse, like make us feel numb, then you have to be bolder with it. You could almost make that half speed, and I think it would kind of work better in that first part. But everyone's right, it needs to have a build. And I think because you've got that pulse going through that's kind of consistent, that emphasizes the lack of build at the moment. And actually what you could do is almost, I think you either need to halve the speed of that or remove it completely and then build in other ways. Like you've got this beautiful synthy, droney stuff, but then we just need to feel that tension, the turn of the screw as we go through the scene. But I love this. I think the sound world that you're in is spot on. I think it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to compliment as well. Carry on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. Is it's a really nice sound palette you've chosen. What I would have done for it tension-wise is actually just do it with harmony instead of building it up in terms of volume. And as Sam just said, sort of the turn of the screw, I would have said, the twisting of the knife. Just find a way to make things more and more dissonant and sort of engage in all that juicy polytonality as it gets up to the point of complete release, or not complete release, as Vincenzo said. So, just find a way, I think, to make the harmony really work for your favor, just because it's too, it just felt too almost simplistic. I think there's a way to manipulate it to make it sound a little bit more twisted and complex. And you can just do that with additional non-chord tones and things like that. Just build it up. I think that's what I would have done. Harmony wise, it could have used a little bit more color.
Davide, I just saw your comment about the reverse percussion hit instead of the piano. The concept is still the same because the percussion has the same envelope as the piano. And Davide is one of my students, and we were talking about the envelope of sounds in our last lesson. So maybe if you want during the next lesson, just wanted to say we can actually look further into it and on how to treat with like reversed audio things in general.
You could bring that. I mean, it's essentially a very short riser, isn't it? And what you could almost do to increase this tension is have another riser that's much slower and building. I mean, maybe if you're reversing things, it might be a nice thing to play with and just extend that a bit earlier, and that's kind of going to achieve what we're all kind of saying, increasing that tension in the latter part.
Ale, did you want to add anything to this? So you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. Basically, what you guys said. Yeah, it felt a bit static, and it could use some risers at the end for sure.
Cool. Very nice work, Davide. Thanks for sending that, and yeah, and thanks again for taking sort of those comments on board from last week. It's really nice to see sort of what this has developed into from what you showed us last week. Awesome. So let's jump on. The last one we've got tonight is Laura's. So, and have you guys all got that?
Is that the pulling smaller?
Pulling 3v202 or
Yeah, the
version
pulling
2
smaller.
Good.
Cool. And this is 237, so we'll just play through this all the way. I'll start that now.
She's been doing it for years, pulling her own hair out. Fuck. Why didn't you tell me it was so bad? You know it's not gonna grow back if you're not careful.
Who even does that?
So...
Cool. Very nice work.
Nice.
Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful music.
Vicki, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Also, yeah, really thought it was very, very pretty. I felt the first cue was tiny bit early, potentially. And I really liked the piano that came in, but I felt like some of the other instruments were fighting each other a little bit in the first cue. And I think I just preferred it once in the moments that it was a bit more pared back. So when it was just the strings with the sort of more atmospheric underneath, I really enjoyed that. Once they're in the bathroom and she's having the flashbacks and pulling her hair out, I felt like there was some good tension, but it didn't quite reflect the tone of it, which was a lot of pain and darkness and angst, and it felt a bit too hopeful. And then I really loved the piano once the mother comes in. That felt very, very emotive. And yeah, again, when she's back in her room, and it just felt like it was a bit it was definitely like the right scale for the movie, in comparison to some of the other bigger sort of orchestrations. But yeah, it was really beautiful. Good job.
I thought the moment when the mom comes in the bathroom at 1:30 was just super touching, and a very, very beautiful contrast, because like suddenly the string goes down, there's a change of orchestration, there's a change of tone, there's a change of timbre in the sound of it. And I think this is a very beautiful way of maintaining the same cue, maintaining the same ensemble, but we're suddenly changing, not the scene, but like something changes. Like we are from like the flashbacks and the anxiety building up to the confrontation with the mom. And it's a very beautiful way to highlight this change of mood, change of what's going on, while still keep the cue going, which is not something easy. Just the way you orchestrated, I thought worked very well. The scale felt perfect. As Vicky was saying, maybe from that point onwards, a bit more than before. But yeah, I thought it was a very brilliant and elegant solution for that specific moment.
Yeah, there's something kind of brave and bold about doing string swells that are separated. And the reason is that you've got to be really careful of dialogue. And Vicky said it came in too early. And so the first two string swells are over dialogue. And so I think it was just a case of shifting it, or even cutting. I mean, it's difficult with the kind of harmonic progression, but you could almost cut the first four swells and it would make sense. But yeah, that was the only thing for me really, was that very first entry, that first swell just felt like, oh, we're still hearing what they're saying. I loved the music. I thought, and I think, you know, that soft piano is just the right kind of intimacy level. And I thought as well, just having that really smooth transition from the kind of, I think it's from the bathroom, isn't it, to the sunlit bedroom, just really even. It really sutured the scenes together, which is what needed to happen there.
We also had great continuity between the bathroom scene and then when she's also in her room again. It just felt like one real continuous musical idea, which was really great, apart from obviously just needing to have a slightly more dissonant and conflicted atmosphere when she's actually in the bathroom before her mother comes in. But in terms of continuity and just making musical sense in context with the story, it was really well done, I thought.
Well, I'll say one thing, and thanks for your comments too. I think I definitely caught the reference from Johansson's Orphée off that. And one thing I'd say is kind of what you're doing in that section, in sort of the first half of this. I think you have the same ideas, but they don't have quite as clear an identity individually as like if you listen to, because that's a sort of recurring concept on a few tracks off of his album Orphée, where each of those, like, he'll have these string swells that they end up becoming a texture that sort of sit in the background. Then he'll have other textures that come in, and he has sort of spoken word and all these different things that then kind of blend in and out of one another. So I'd say one of the only differences here is that you have that established as a texture, but then you'll have sort of the melody and the winds and the piano kind of coming in, but it's not as clear. Like, they sort of each have a spotlight, and they're kind of spotlights together at certain points. where I think if you made that melody maybe a little bit more consistent so that it could sort of sit in that background, you can then kind of manipulate them as like, here are my 3 elements, and I want to sort of bring them in here, duck it out here a little bit, and sort of evolve the arrangement very gradually. And then I think where it strips down to solo piano, why it's much more effective at that moment is because that's where it has a very clear identity, and it's a very clear progression. And we can just sort of let that then play the mood that you're giving us with the arrangement. And so I thought that's where it felt like very natural, and we could just let this sort of picture play through that a little bit. So I'd say that was probably the biggest difference for me in kind of that first and second half, and why the second half was maybe a bit more effective. But definitely if you go back and listen to Orphée, try to listen to it with that ear and trying to think like, oh, what is the function of each of these different elements that he has, and then what's he doing with those compositionally? Because I think that's what's really interesting about a lot of Jóhann Jóhannsson's writing, is that it's very minimal because each element has like a very clear purpose and identity.
Well, his thing as well is time. He just takes so much time. He's so patient. And I'm guessing when you tempt this with that, you took that much of a track that long, you know, where he's just, it's the same thing, but he's just doing enough, and he's just, but you know, and he's just so patient with his music, and so it's tricky to make that work in a short film, you know. But I think, yeah, I get what Mike's saying there. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Mike, is to find a way to have it evolve as naturally as possible in what isn't actually that long, you know, a time. But yeah, nice.
I just wanted to say that sorry, go on, Mike, if it's on the same.
Just to complete that thought is I think kind of I might have mentioned this on a previous stream at some point, but what is kind of effective about these minimal composers like with Jóhann Jóhannsson or Max Richter or some of Olafur Arnold's stuff, why it sort of sits so well on film a lot of the time is because it kind of sets a slow process of this evolving mood and lets the picture tell the story. So it really invites the viewer into what's happening on screen. And so I think kind of when writing in that style, that's something I'm sort of conscious of if I'm using that sort of style for something, because it's really then kind of leaving space for the viewer to watch and sort of write themselves into it. You're sort of participating in that experience a bit. And it can be extremely effective. And I think that's why so many directors really love it, and they can tempt their music or their scenes with their music, and it works because it really draws you into it. So I think that's just something to be a little conscious of with kind of using minimalism in this way, modern minimalism, is that it really asks the viewer to be drawn in. So when doing that, you can't break the sort of scene. You have to like let that slow process really just be very natural and not really have any jagged edges.
Nice. I want to check out lots of these scores now.
I just wanted to say one thing about the score. I think the second cue was felt perfect for it. It was intimate and nothing to say about that. It was beautiful music. Regarding the first cue, of course, what Vicky said, a little bit too early. And for me, it lacked a bit of frenzy in the bathroom when she starts pulling her hair. And also the thing it didn't convince me too much was that quick diminuendo before the mum comes in the bathroom. I would have ended on a more like abrupt ending. I think that takes away a lot of the tension, that quick diminuendo that we listen to. So that's my thought.
As in, you would have made a shorter diminuendo, Ale?
Or no, just like I would have liked subito to niente, like no diminuendo at all, like a crescendo to complete silence.
Interesting, because that change to me was one of the most one of the things in the music that worked better. but I can't remember exactly how that diminuendo went. I felt that like the contrast between what was going on before and then suddenly dropping it down was beautiful. But
no, it's still, in my opinion, it still has to come down. It comes down.
Just too gradual.
It's too gradual for me. It should be more abrupt when the mom comes in my opinion.
Cool. Guys, I think, well, maybe we can end there. We're 40 minutes over, but I'm happy to do it. And thank you so much, Vicki, for staying with us and for doing this in the first place, coming in and doing, a quarter of this entire season with us. So really big round of applause in the comments for you.
Thank you. I've loved it. It's been brilliant. I really enjoyed tonight. It's very good.
This is so helpful to have you, and I know this gives so much, because just having your perspective on this and the chance to kind of work on one of your projects that you've done and get that feedback is really a rare opportunity for kind of where most of the viewers and participants are kind of at that stage. So especially to have somebody with your experience to come on and do that. So really big thank you. I appreciate you so much in general, and I appreciate you so much for doing this.
Well, it's mirrored right back at all of you, and I have learnt so much as well. And this is kind of like a massive privilege of being in a room with all of you guys and seeing everyone's work. Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks.
And thank you again for everybody who submitted. Really appreciate it. It takes a lot to throw your work up in front of everybody. It's a really brave thing to do, and to and also know that within this community we can kind of be very direct about it, because we know that that's what you're here for. So I really, a big thank you for you guys for putting in that effort. Especially, I know what a lot of you are doing right now in school and are very busy with a lot of deadlines coming up, and so taking this extra time to do it and really sort of pushing yourself. These are the things that really help you grow and improve. So thanks so much for participating in this. And it's not just you who gets that feedback, it's everybody who's watching who gets to benefit from that too. So you're really kind of helping to contribute to that for everyone.
A lot of talent tonight, guys. Absolutely.
Yeah,
a lot of
fantastic job. Cool. So thank you guys so much. Just another quick reminder. So we're going to swap around our last two sessions. Next week, we're going to do what we've got is Sam recorded an interview with Jean-Stéphane, who is a amazingly experienced orchestrator, and also in some ways kind of a curator of amazing experience from the best orchestrators there are. Somebody who has spoken to and studied with and had advice from everybody you could think of when it comes to orchestration in film music. So that's a real treat. We have this massive interview. We're going to pare down parts of that, pick out some specifics, and sort of do a playback session where we'll then be commenting on sort of some of Jean's responses. The next thing we're going to do for the 8th and final week of this season is we'll do an interview with a mixing engineer, and we'll post about this on the socials soon. We would love to get your questions to a mixing engineer. So we'll post about this on the socials probably Friday, but I'd love to hear, like, what do you guys want to know, and then I'll ask that. So we'll also maybe have some of our own questions, or just get some advice kind of what, to kind of help people, with their mixes when they're trying to figure this out. Obviously, mixing is kind of a dark art for a lot of people for a long time. It's something, all of us are still constantly improving on. So keep an eye out for that. Probably Friday, as I said, we'll post about that, so that then you can just comment some of your questions in there. And really excited for the next 2 weeks to kind of wrap up this season. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks again. Nice to see you all.
Thanks,
Nice
Vicki.
to see you
guys.
Thank you, Vicki, so much. And we'll call it a night.